Don't give up. Never, ever, ever give up.
So I remember once I went home from school, 5th grade, and said to my mother, when I grow up, I'm going to be a scientist. And she said, oh no, those kind of women can never get married and never have children. So of course, I proved them wrong. I got married several times. My mother had a very long battle with breast cancer. Um, uh, she died, and basically on her deathbed, she said to me, you were always so smart. You could have figured out this breast cancer thing. You could have cured breast cancer. I didn't go into science immediately, but within 2 years of my mother dying, I found myself in the middle of a really bad divorce, uh, married to a Middle Eastern man, and I ended up absolutely penniless. I had no family to help me anymore. Uh, really a pretty nerve-wracking situation. One of the only things that was in my name was my Ferrari. So I got a lot of money for this Ferrari that I didn't pay very much for. And I thought, okay, I'm going to bet on myself. I can go to school, I can learn how to do something that will allow me to earn a man's salary. So that's how I went to Northeastern. It's a great school. They let you do all kinds of things. I ended up writing a real high level program in MATLAB that would compare laser data coming off of aircraft vortices that are spun off of aircraft wings, and then compare that laser data to a library of simulated vortices. And so that got me recruited to Harvard, which was another great place, amazing people there. And at Harvard, I did feel different. I did feel like I did not belong there. And luckily, one of my professors, a great guy, Don Wiley, who is now no longer with us, called me into his office, and he had a little egg timer, you know, that he'd flip over. Okay, he has 3 minutes, and he said, "I get the feeling that you think that we made a big mistake in accepting you," which of course is how I felt. And he said, "We didn't." So it was really good that he supported me that way and gave me the confidence to think that I could do this. I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges that women face when they're in high-tech areas. And so I know Natalia talked a little bit about meeting with investors and that experience. And that's not really that unusual. Things are changing, but I would say one of the experiences that I'll share with you is I had to travel to Florida to meet with an investor who is an extremely wealthy private investor. And after spending half a day with him, and he was very interested, he understood the technology, and okay, I'd like to invest 30 million in your company. And I'm thinking, great, you know, this is what we've been working toward. And then he said, you know, if you could learn to like me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I like you. Oh, don't play coy with me, dear. If you could learn to like me, and if this could also be a personal relationship. Oh no. This is strictly business, strictly. I called his driver. I was shuffled off to the airport immediately, and I felt so bad. I called an ex-husband, ex-Bob, and I said, I feel so cheap. And he said, 30 million? 30 million ain't cheap, honey. Tell him you have an ex-husband who will do it for half. So that's one of my experiences with sexism in investors. And another thing is that a lot of our investors, after I started this company, Minerva, which, by the way, is the Roman name for the goddess of wisdom, Athena. So after I started Minerva, we got all money from private investors, high net worth individuals. And at one point, they thought it would be best for the company and best for the investors if we hired a real CEO, which is code for male. And so, I basically had to. The board of directors was kind of demanding it. So we hired a male CEO, and within a year, the board fired him and put me back in charge. Another time, straight out of Harvard, I took my DNA chip technology to a startup out in California, and I was put in as chief scientific officer to commercialize what I had invented at Harvard. And then when we got some big companies interested and Motorola was on the hook to buy us out, the CEO told me I was being replaced with somebody who looked like a chief scientific officer. So what do you do in that case? What I did was I negotiated a different contract. I said, I don't want shares vested according to time. If Motorola is going to buy us out, it's going to be because we hit these 5 milestones. And I had a certain number of shares for each milestone that I hit. I said, that's a win-win situation. And so he finally agreed to that. And I think 2 weeks later, I walked out with a heck of a lot of shares that less than a year later, when Motorola bought us out, it turned into a heck of a lot of money. So that's just some of the way to deal with the challenges that being a woman poses. And there is a gender bias for women who work, whether it's a high-tech field or even if you're a lawyer or whatever. If you're a male, people often think, oh, you're aggressive, you're assertive, you're a strong person. If you're a woman and have those attributes, they call you bad names. And I remember once, I told you I went through a couple of divorces. One was especially bitter because it involved child custody, and a court-appointed psychologist called guardian ad litem, who talks to you for an hour and then decides, who the kids would be better off with, said that I had delusions of grandeur. Well, I did, but what's the difference between a delusion and a dream? And if you can't dream it, how are you going to do it? You have to be able to see yourself doing that. And so I encourage you all to have a dream for what you want to do. And then, so that it isn't a delusion, you have to work your butt off to make that actually happen.
So I wanted to share a little bit about my journey and how I got to where I am today, and we'll go from there. So I had started out with a very strong interest in math, even as a young child. I think it came easily to me, so that kind of naturally led me to enjoy doing it. And it was a bit of a reinforcing cycle. And I also really liked aliens. So I would, spend nights on my trampoline looking at the stars and thinking about aliens and how surely there was life out there. And so I spent my childhood thinking about that and math. And then I made it to high school, where I had a guidance counselor that realized, like, you can actually combine these two things, and there's a major for that, and it's called aerospace engineering. And so that's my fate was sealed, and I went to college to study that. And then I stuck that through. I did a master's also in a space related field, and then a PhD, and they've all been related to rocket engines or ion engines. And that's where I continue to work today in that industry and with that technology. It's been an interesting ride being a woman in aerospace and being a woman raising venture money. And I often look up at a conference or in a room and at a government meeting or something, and I really am the only woman there. So I did, as a segue into some of my less positive experiences and really feeling some sexism in my life. I did want to say though that I think on the whole, the aerospace industry and many other industries I've interacted with, people are one-on-one, generally quite respectful and good-hearted. And so I would hate for anyone to walk away feeling like, aerospace isn't a good industry for me, because I think it's quite a positive place to be, and I meet a lot of really smart, kind people every day. And that said, we do have some problems there, and I've learned a lot having experienced them. So I wanted to share a couple. And one of them was I was selected as the keynote speaker, so kind of the main speaker at a conference, and I was trying to enter into the conference hall kind of halfway through the talk before mine, because I had to go get mic'd up and I needed to go in a side door. Um, and so I was following those instructions, and I got stopped by the security guard, who said, excuse me, young lady, there's an aerospace conference going on here today. Where are you trying to go? And I was like, yes, I know. I am supposed to be entering this door. Thank you very much. So we had to walkie-talkie someone else to come over to actually let me in to go get mic'd up to give the talk I was supposed to give. So that was one experience, and things like that can feel quite discouraging. Um, and I'll share one more story, and then kind of my main takeaways from living through this. When I first started the company, I knew I needed to go raise money from investors. So one of my very first pitches, and pitching to ask for money, but also ask for advice and to learn how to do this process well, I was talking to an investor, and the investor told me that I had to take voice lessons to lower my voice to sound more like a man. Otherwise, I would never be able to raise money. And if you're hearing me talking now, I did not follow that advice. I still have a rather high-pitched voice. But, I said, thank you, good day. And, I left, and I thought to myself, what I really think is going on is that this person has a model of what a leader and what a CEO and what a strong person should be like. And it's an old model that's just outdated. And I think today it's a really exciting time where these models are changing. I don't need to look and sound and act like a man anymore. And the more strong women we have, really embracing their own strengths and their own attributes, and showing people, I can have these things instead, and I can still be a really strong leader or a good scientist, a good engineer. We will keep updating that model, and more people will be open and willing to, jump on board. So that's what I tell myself, and sometimes it still really does suck and is a long slog, but you're not alone. You have communities like this, and I think we'll get there as we keep updating everybody's really outdated models of what strong leaders can be like. So that's what I was hoping to share today. Be yourself. Don't feel like you need to change to fit these stereotypes.
The question was always, well, she's smart enough, but is she tough enough to play in Massachusetts state government and Massachusetts politics? And I had to learn ways to be seen as tough enough. There's no doubt in my mind that doing the confrontations that I had in environmental affairs, in being sued by the Secretary of Interior, sued Massachusetts for trying to block the offshore oil drilling on the Georges Bank. There were strong confrontations, lots of lawyers on my side as well as the federal government side. But all of that was sort of tangential to the fact that, was I strong enough to do this? And I had to learn the techniques of television. I am soft-spoken and would seem sort of, I was always afraid of over-emoting. But I learned that television is such a cool medium that if you don't put your force into it, you're too laid back. So I would practice how to be stern, how my hand gestures as well as my voice could make me appear to be strong. I always knew I was strong, but the appearance was different from the reality, and I had to learn all of that. So those were the things about being a woman at that time, and still to this day, there are assumptions about women being weak or more thoughtful and reasonable and not having that strength, where women still have to prove and demonstrate at times that there's real force and conviction and will behind their style, which may be more laid back or maybe more soft-spoken, but certainly just as tough as any man. The best advice I can give is you have to be true to yourself and what matters to you. I mean, for me, I got into politics and into public life after being deeply involved in work in the civil rights movement, even before the women's movement. And so, making sure that minorities are included, that there's gender equity, but particularly racial equity, has been one of the themes for me throughout my life. I brought that into environmental affairs. I made sure that if you wanted to build a park, if a mayor in the city of Lynn wanted to build a park in Lynn, that they had to comply with the Commission Against Discrimination and open up housing, public housing in Lynn. Just as I was leaving office, the then Speaker of the House was from Lynn, and I was blocking a park there because they hadn't complied with the Commission Against Discrimination. So to me, you bring your passion into these offices. I settled it out. He got his park, but he got it complying with the Commission Against Discrimination. So I brought into my public offices the kind of values I've had around equality and played them out through the policies and the programs that you can have, which touch every single part of any state government. So to me, it's follow your passions, what really matters to you, and then you bring it into whatever setting you have. And that's very important because if you don't have that sort of bellwether, then you're just going from job to job, and it's a job. When it fulfills your sense of values and making our society better or our community better, then you really put your heart and soul into the work you do, and that doesn't feel like work. So to me, it's sort of find those passions, find what matters to you, and then take it into any opportunity. It can be in the private sector, although I think that's harder. Clearly in the public sector, in nonprofit work, state government work is, I think, the undiscovered gem, because there's so much power there and so much ability to bring those values of decency and equality into government. So that's it. Just find that passion and stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Ghana, West Africa. I'm from a prominent family, maybe today what they call the 1%. So I lived this fancy life. My dad was a general in the army and a diplomat. So we traveled around, lived in Pakistan for 3 years. Then we came to Washington, to the US with the embassy. Shortly after we got here, there was a major coup in Ghana, and they were killing the generals. So we became refugees. We lost everything. I say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I quickly ended up with a plastic spoon. So I had to get my first job when I was 13, and I have not stopped working since. So the lessons I learned were, number one, my success depended on me and my hard work. Number two, I also learned the lesson that, like maybe some of the people in the Depression, there's the disaster is just around the corner. So you have to work to avoid that disaster from coming. And I still have this attitude of when that disaster happens, will I have enough? So it was a very difficult time for my family and for me. I had an unpleasant high school experience. All of a sudden, I became a minority, a poor minority, a refugee. It was difficult. I think the teachers also had funny attitudes about people of color. So I remember in a Spanish 3 class, it was first week of school, and she really didn't mean this ugly. She said, I can tell what grades my students are going to get just by looking at them. And she pointed at someone and said, you're an A student. And she pointed at someone else and said, you're a B student. And then she pointed at me and said, you're a C student. Ahora hablo español perfectamente. I'm fluent in Spanish. The reason being, I really felt like I had something to prove to her. So I did not get a C in her class like she predicted, but I also did not get an A, which I deserved. And the lesson there, when I got to college, I majored in accounting. I did extremely well in college. College was a very different environment. I think almost the teachers were even more, professors were more positive, I would say, towards minorities, women of color. So I went through, I was a CPA with Deloitte and Touche, went through Harvard. And again, at Harvard, when I was looking for what job I was going to do, it was that same lesson I learned in high school. I said, I do not want to question why I succeed or fail. So at the time, I believed if I went into the investment business and I was a good stock picker, I would succeed, because it's very black or white. You said the stock is going to go up, it goes up. You say no, it's a sell, it goes down. And how can anyone argue with that? Obviously, life is not so black and white. People do have attitudes that can affect you. And they're not bad people. It's really their experience. So I remember my junior year, when we're all looking for internships, everyone said, well, I want to be Black. I want to be a woman, because you're going to get all the jobs because of affirmative action. And you could tell that there was a lot of some kind of a resentment. And it was very interesting. I got a job at Deloitte & Touche as an intern. And then at the end of the summer, they have a conference for all the interns. And I get to the conference, and there's a kid from my class. And without being obnoxious, I think he was the dumbest accounting kid in the entire class. But I said, what are you doing here? I knew he didn't have the grades to get a good summer internship. Well, his father knew the partner, and he made a phone call. So, you see, here I'm being told I'm going to have an advantage because of the color of my skin, and it turns out other people have advantages, and you saw that over and over again. And well, what can I say to that? I say, so what? You work hard. Don't give up. Just keep going. The world has changed a lot, and the world continues to change. When I was in high school, Nelson Mandela was in jail. Okay, he's no longer in jail. I can just give you example after example. The other thing too is, it is true, when you're hired, people really look at you and they say, oh, well, she just got the job. She's the diversity hire. And they may even believe that. But your success can very much be up to you, because I would find myself, they'd hire me, they'd be really watching me. But if you work hard, I mean, really work hard, then it almost flips and goes the other way. So, 1 minute I was, oh, we just had to hire her. And the next minute, oh, she's a genius. Oh, and now, I'm not a genius, and they certainly didn't hire me because of the color of my skin. But you can take that disadvantage, and with hard work, people will change their minds. Now, the things I will tell you, going back to the beginning, okay, as a woman, okay, it is not easy. But again, what I will tell you is, do get a skill. If you have a skill, that is something no one can take away from you. Okay, if you are a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, make sure you have a skill, because that will be your protection. Okay. um you know, the other thing is, again, you have this attitude, maybe these beliefs you have when you're young. Okay, people do change, and people are willing to change their mind. Hey, is yes, we are women. Yes, in theory, we're supposed to make less than men do, but it really doesn't have to be that way. And keep an open mind, work hard, and I promise you, you're going to do far, far better than you could ever, ever imagine.
I went to an all-girl private high school and an all-girl private college, which means that I did not compete with men. In other words, I didn't even realize you couldn't compete with men. That was it, you know? We were the presidents, you know, of the school. We were the people who ran everything. And so it was kind of a rude awakening when I went into the work field. I have a degree in political science and sociology, and I wanted to work in government. So girl, this for me is these little moments for me are the lessons I want to portray to you. I wanted to work in government, and I could not get a job because I could not get a bad job because I lacked a skill. I think Natalia said you need a skill. The skill I lacked was typing. I only typed 17 words a minute, and I could not get a bad job. But I went to my local newspaper. I met with the publisher. And after an hour, he said, I'm hiring you as a cub reporter. And I said, I need to tell you something. I can't really type. And he said, I don't care if you can type, you can think. And that was how I became a reporter. I walked into a newsroom. It was filled with men. I mean, just, I can't even think if there was one woman in that newsroom. The job lasted a very short time because I wrote for a column and it didn't work, and I was out of a job, and I went to the best newspaper in the Midwest, and they didn't know what to do with me. I mean, I had very little experience, and they sent me to meet a man editor. And this is another thing I wanted to tell you. He sat down with me and he said, kid, what's the worst word you've ever said in your life? And I spelled out S-H-I-T. And he said, get the hell out of here. And I went back to the editor of the newspaper and I said, he won't hire me because I don't curse. And he said, well, I guess I could put you in the library. I said, no, I'm not working in a library. I'm not doing that. And so this is the lesson, girls. You have to stand up for yourselves, you know. So he said, okay, and he put me in the women's department. They had in newspapers a women's department. How do you get out of the women's department? You just keep suggesting all kinds of stories and writing and competing and working hard. And it was all going so well until I met this man named Murphy. And I lived in Los Angeles, and I lived in St. Louis, and he lived in Los Angeles, and I quit and left everything behind. And I went to Los Angeles, and I got a job at the Los Angeles Times, which is a great newspaper. Along the way, there are going to be moments of challenge. I remember interviewing this famous actor, and he jumped out of his seat and leapt on top of me during the interview. And boy, he was sorry he did that. So there are challenges. There are people who will say things to you, you know, but it's up to you, you know, to make sure that you stand up for yourselves. I want to mention money discrepancy. It seemed to me that the men always were making more money, and you had to learn to negotiate for yourself. You know, negotiate for yourself. When I left television to go back to print, they asked me how much money I wanted, and I said, I want as much as I make in TV. I'm not coming back for any less than that. And so you have to stand up for yourself. It's not easy to do it.